repercussions. There should be punishment for his actions, right? Driving with controlled substance, not having a license, all those things add up, right? But I think the thing about America right now and the minds of everything is not about, about police doing their jobs or prosecutors doing their job. I think it's about the excessive amount of what they do, right? So police officers might have to use force to take you down. Understood. However, it's the excessive violence, the excessive force. In this case, yeah, he should do time, for sure. I mean, if he's a repeat offender, he has these things on him. I understand that you can't, you're trying to get, the technicality, of like not having the drugs in the bag or whatever it is. Still had the drugs in his car in his possession. Should do time, but almost 20 years. So now he's, let's just say he's 60 years old. He gets out at 68. At 78. Like, that's a long, not what he's supposed to do. After he gets out, so the excessive amount
of, changing that. And so I think that's going to be something that's kind of my goal, and do what like Adam Foss does. Really bring people aware. Because if you think about it, if Oklahoma has the highest incarceration rate, should they, typically we should have safer streets, right?
Yeah.
If that's the case, if we're locking up the bad guys, we still have above average crime rate. How does that make any sense?
Come on, man.
Or do we have, our Oklahomans just tend to commit more crimes than anybody else in the nation?
We're in the Bible Belt. We don't commit too many.
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's just Oklahoma full of bad people. We can't lock them all up. It just doesn't make any sense. So clearly the system's probably the most broken here. But people don't want to address it. Also, they kind of go hand in hand. Typically, undereducated, unemployed people are incarcerated. Why do we have one of the worst education systems in the country?
We're 48 out of 50.
One of the worst. They go hand in hand. Highest incarceration, one of the worst education systems. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? People just don't want to realize that.
It's because we were under Mary Fallon for so long. Or should I say Mary Fallon?
Yeah.
Data proves that what we're doing is not working, and we still have a high crime rate, and we're locking people up. What is the use of doing that? Why are we doing that? Why are we spending all that money there? Is it because the jail systems or the prison system are private companies? Is that why?
Insanity. Keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right?
So
we sit here and we talk about we're gonna really lock down. We're really gonna focus on the criminal aspect of in Oklahoma, right? The lock. What's it called? Like locking people up. We're gonna really focus on incarceration. The incarceration rate. We're gonna really focus on that, right? But we're not going to focus on what causes that. So we can find surface level things, but we can't actually dig deep and we'll say, what's the reason? Not look surface level.
Well, I think what you got is you got a old system. It's kind of like I was talking to Double Nickel earlier. I said we all have our quirks, the way we do things. Simple things like the way I tie my shoes, the way I cook my food, the way I put out the trash, the way I do this in the house, the way I clean. And to break away from that, even if you find out there's a better way of doing it, you don't do it. And I can only imagine in the prosecutorial, the prosecutorial system with the judges and the juries and
the same way for hundreds of years.
Exactly, and it's horrible. And there are people like Adam Foss that are trying to do a few people that are trying to do different things, and that's why I commend you trying to get into the law system, because it does take young bright minds to get in there and do things differently, but also people like regular people. You got to remember, a lot of these positions are voted upon. Sheriffs and judges and all these people. Exactly, agents, all of them. And I got to admit, that's true. When the local elections come around here, I haven't done my research. I don't know. I'm like, okay, Judge Tolo or from below, yeah, sure, I'll check them off, whatever, because that's what everybody's talking about. Or just the sign I saw outside, so I'm going to check. But if you don't do your research, you don't know what these judges stand for.
Absolutely.
You can't just vote Republican, Democrat, because just because they're Democrat or they're Republican doesn't mean they vote exactly.
This is a 2017 study. The average cost per inmate is $31,000 nationwide. The average cost per inmate.
Okay.
Just for a year.
Just for a year. And that's the average. There's some states that go up to 60,000.
Absolutely.
Okay, so why would you change anything?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Why would you, if you're a state?
It's a money mill.
Keep that
it's
revenue
all
stream
politics. Up. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I love Quinton's attitude and what he wants to do, because Adam Foss calls this the new civil rights movement, where we are changing. You got to have young people that believe in something and will get, because you're going to come up against a resistance. You're going to come up
especially the older group that's in there.
Absolutely. They're used to making their money.
The sheriff making some extra money because of the federal government wanted to send these overflow, I guess, inmates, because our prisons are overpopulated. So they sent it to the lowest income state prisons. And I think this one was actually in Alabama or somewhere. And so this guy was, anything extra that wasn't spent by the federal government was giving them, he got to pocket. And it was ended up being over, I think it was over $1.5 million in like 3 years. But that also meant that he decided to, and it mainly stemmed from the food. It was the food budget. So if he cut back on food, the more money he got to pocket. So he was notoriously known for having even crappier than regular prison food.
So he had a loophole. He found basically a loophole in it, because he didn't. You said he didn't get prosecuted.
No prosecution, because it technically was allowed.
Wow.
Yep.
That's crazy.
So no cod, you only had tilapia. Just $3 less a meal.
Can't see what.
It's crazy because the initial choice of what charges are brought up by the prosecutor, nobody else.
The initial choice, yes.
So what charges are being brought up against the defendant? It's all the prosecutor just deciding. They can come out of thin air. There's books that you look at and like, okay, if they have this, you can charge it this way. But there was an example I wanted to go over with. Let's say a gun is found in a car that transported a defendant to a burglary. A prosecutor could qualify it as a crime of violence. If proven the gun qualified as a firearm, the defendant carried it during and in relation to the burglary, which triggers a minimum 5-year sentence for the crime of violence, in addition to the burglary charge.
Oh, wow.
Or a prosecutor could be more lenient, because that 5 years would be non-consecutive to the burglary charge, so it just gets added on. Whereas a lenient prosecutor may just charge for burglary, because the gun technically wasn't used.
It wasn't a factor in the
robbery. It was just in a vehicle that drove whenever they were driven to a burglary. So that's just one example. I mean, a prosecutor can he could end up serving 2 years, or it could for the burglary, or it could serve 8 or 20.
So with that being a record statistic, wouldn't that mess up our statistic where you say gun violence, because you could qualify it as a gun violence?
Yeah,
because there's a gun used, though it wasn't fired.
I think it could be, depending on how it was charged.
Wow.
Yeah, so typically the initial charges are the final charges as well. So when a prosecutor, whatever they decide for, that's typically what eventually gets charged. And with a society that has 97% guilty pleas, whatever the prosecutor is charging is happening.
97%?
Yeah.
I know in Cleveland, it is. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say,
it's across the nation, 97%.
And let's just be honest, though, which I listened to a podcast earlier, and they just said, the lawyers were saying this, they said, hey, and here's the truth, when you walk into a courtroom, if you're black, you're going to be in worse trouble than if you're white.
5 times more likely.
You're just automatically not going to be given the benefit of the doubt.
Nope.
Man, how OJ get away? How did man get away?
Well, they locked his behind up those eventually.
Also, the U.S. Sentencing Commission in 2016 did a study on black and versus white males.
Yes. Okay.
The black male offenders receive on average 19.1% longer sentences than white male counterparts for the same crime. Wow. So they decided to look deeper into that, though, because they not only considered the same crime, but let's look at also if they have the same background, same priors, because that plays into it.
That's good.
About 20% still receive more,
so
even with the same background. Yeah, it's still the same. It doesn't matter what the
So when you're comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges, apples to apples, 20% more of the black population received. Wow.
Yeah, versus white men.
Well, there's 14% of African Americans in the country, but yet 50% of our 14% is locked up in prisons. So there's something wrong with that.
Right.
And it's not just because we're inherently violent. There's just something wrong with that altogether.
Well, and typically, and it's crazy because I had a discussion with a coworker today. It's not that I really don't believe in the that we're most of America is racist. I don't think that's accurate representation.
Right. I understand.
Right. Yeah, sure, of course.
I really believe though that because a lot of the black population is in poverty-stricken areas, that all started whenever the civil rights movement was coming. It was actually before that where they were all put into one areas because they didn't want them to succeed.
Right,
and the thing is, it's not like it's not like we're racist. We're like, oh no, that's where they belong. We don't know how to make a difference. We don't know how to help them out.
It's a systemic oppression.
Yes.
It's something built into the system, and it continually moves forward.
Yeah, it's just like, well, it's been that way forever. What do we do about it? It's the same we were talking about. We don't know how to change.
And you find the judges, like in this one particular place, I think it was 31 judges, and 29 of them are white, and there's 2 African Americans.
Right.
So you get individuals, because the majority of the people that are coming into this court are black. So you get these individuals that now these men and women are making life-changing decisions on individuals that they don't really understand.
I'd love to see a study of, say in Cleveland, because we were talking about Cleveland, for example, right? So say that we were talking about Cleveland, if I went in to interview for a judge position, I know maybe that's not how it works, whatever.
Right.
But I go in to interview and Quinton goes in to interview, right? I'm African-American, Quinton's Caucasian. We go into interview together. Am I not getting the job because I'm African-American? Or is it because not African-Americans are applying to be in that position?